Brampton Center.
Mr. Speaker, it's a great pleasure for me to have this opportunity to share my idea and opinion regarding the Bill C-14 to amend the Criminal Code. Mr. Speaker, in an anonymous decision on February 6, 2016, the Supreme Court of Canada turned down the provisions of Criminal Code giving Canadian adults who are mentally competent, suffering intolerably and enduringly the right to a doctor to help in dying. Court suspended its ruling for 12 months, with the decision taking effect in 2016, giving the government enough time to amend the laws. In January 2016, the court granted an additional 4-month extension to its ruling suspension. Mr. Speaker, until now, it's a crime in Canada to assist. It's a crime in Canada to end one's own life. As a result, people who are grievously and irremediably ill cannot seek a physician assistant in dying and may be condemned to the life for severe and intolerable suffering. A person facing this prospect has two options. They can take their own life permanently, often by violent, dangerous means, or they can suffer until they die from natural causes. The choices are cruel. Mr. Speaker, this enactment amends the Criminal Code to, among other things, A, create exemptions from the offences of culpable homicide for aiding suicide and to administering the noxious things in order to permit medical practitioners and nurse practitioners to provide medical assistance in dying and to permit pharmacists and other persons to assist in this process. B, specify the criteria of eligibility and the safeguards that must be respected before medical assistance in dying may be provided to a person. C, requires a medical practitioner and nurse practitioner who receives the request from the pharmacist who dispense substances further to the medical assistant in dying, provide information for the purpose of monitoring medical assistant in dying, authorize the Minister of Health to make regulations respecting that information, and C, create new offences for failing to comply with the safeguards for foregoing or destroying medical related to the medical assistant in dying, for failing to provide the required information, and for contravening the regulations. This enactment also makes related amendments to other statutes being affected. Mr. Speaker, we now have reached to the final stage of debate in this House regarding the process of hours of debate on Bill C-14. Mr. Speaker, the biggest thing during these debates was the sense of compassion with which this House heard the members debating on their individual constituents. That is the reason that this bill touches the hearts of not only the members of this House, but also the hearts of the Canadians from coast to coast to coast. Now, when this bill has reached to the final stage, I appreciate and congratulate every member for actively participating in building the most important and valuable law on assisted dying, and also the government for affording full opportunity to all the members to be part and parcel of this delicate and important legislation. It's also appreciated that the extensive hard work done by both the Ministers, Health and Justice, and by the members of the Joint Committee of Senate and the House. Mr. Speaker, being the new member of this legislation process, I was thrilled to watch yesterday's voting by House on numerous motions. I saw members were in favor of the few motions and were against on other motions. I realized the importance of these motions on assisted dying for the members of the House. That's the way members use their choice out of their own conscience and the will of the constituents. I realized the real sense of democracy and the two parliamentary decisions process being adopted. Mr. Speaker, this enactment to amend the existing criminal code is an important step and auxiliary to the new enactments regarding medical assisted dying. Being legislators, it's our duty to see that medical service providers and other persons who provide the assistance in medical assisted dying are legally safe. Mr. Speaker, as we all know, that this is a first major revolutionary enactment. Going forward, there may be many ancillary issues cropping up. I and my Liberal caucus colleagues, as well as many other members of the House, are keen to see that bill should pass. I urge all the members of this House to vote in favor of Bill C-14, an act to amend the criminal code, and to make the related amendments to the Act for the medical assisted dying. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Kitchener-Conestoga.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Repeatedly throughout the day today, and even last night in the vote, we saw a reticence on the part of primarily the Liberal Party to accept the recommendation and the amendment that would guarantee conscience rights for medical professionals and institutions. Repeatedly, they indicate, well, we could just count on the regulatory bodies. The provincial regulatory bodies will care for this, and conscience protection will be guaranteed. But, Mr. Speaker, as we speak, the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario and Saskatchewan have both indicated that there is an expectation on the part of their medical professionals to at least refer for the practice of physician-assisted suicide. So, again, I would ask my colleague on the other side of the House, and ask my colleague who just spoke particularly, would he not agree that at the very least, if we're going to have a bill that goes down the path of allowing physician-assisted suicide and voluntary euthanasia, that at the very least we should guarantee in law, in this bill, that physicians and healthcare institutions will not be obligated to act against their moral conscience. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable member for Brampton Centre.
Thank you, my colleague, for asking this question. As we know that we are going through this enactment, which is useful for the person, those who are really in need of the medical assistance for dying, the persons, those who are working there, for the purpose of execution of the Act, are required to be exempted from the offence of culpable homicide. That's what Supreme Court has already given the instructions to pass the law to make the procedural easy for them to perform the duties. So it's the duty of the physician or the duty of the person, those who are medically authorized to perform these acts, and we are here to see that they are safe. They should be provided the safeguards for doing the act.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Vancouver Kingsway.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, we've all struggled with this very delicate and sensitive issue in light of the Supreme Court direction, which has left parliamentarians with the task of constructing a law that conforms with the Supreme Court decision in the Carter case. And, of course, the Carter case laid down very specific criteria in allowing Kay Carter, the litigant in that case, getting the court's approval to her to access physician-assisted death. Now, Ms. Carter did not have a terminal illness. She specifically did not have a condition that was going to lead to her foreseeable death, yet the court found that her rights under the Charter were violated. So my question through you, Mr. Speaker, to the honourable member is, when the court laid down the clear criteria of requiring a grievous and irremediable condition, Can you explain why the Liberal government added the extra criteria of requiring that death be reasonably foreseeable when the lawyer that argued the case and every serious constitutional expert in the land, the Court of Appeal in Alberta and in Ontario, have both all indicated that that will be unconstitutional?
Honourable member for Brampton Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Member, for asking me the question, which is very. My colleague is especially concerned about the person dying when they are not critically ill. But the government, at this stage, we have seen that the Supreme Court has given the directions that we should take care of those persons, those who are critically ill, and they need the really assistance in dying, and follow the procedures which we have to now enact in this enactment, and see that those enactments are being followed by the practitioners and other persons, those who are executing the law. So my submission here is that when we say that assisted dying is properly being executed, the laws are being properly executed, that is the authority when they get the doctors and other persons, those who are executing, nurse, maybe the prescription provider, they all have to got the right to provide their duties freely, so that they are not having the fear in the mind that they will be penalized later on. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments. Gaston Kamanta, the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm wondering if I could ask the member if he can just kind of elaborate on the importance of establishing the legal framework by June 6th. This is something in which we believe is very important. And if the member, at the beginning of his comments, he talked about the Supreme Court of Canada decision. And that decision means that we need to have the legislation passed by June 6th. And if he might want to provide some further comment, because we are going to be reaching a vote fairly shortly, just how important it is we all have a responsibility to address the Supreme Court of Canada's decision.
The Honourable Member for Brampton Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for the member for asking me the question, which is really, it's a time-barred question concerning the time bar which is we are facing. The instructions given by the Supreme Court is June 6th is coming. The limitation period is looming on our hands. We know that we have to meet the limitation guidelines. We should respect the Supreme Court order. But at the same time, we are trying our best to meet those limitations. But this House has, up to this time, as I already said in my submission, that this House has tried the best to meet those requirements. Every member has put their own part and parcel played in this debates, and now at the final stage, when we are just prepared to make it as a law, we should work together to see that this enactment is coming into force as per the requirement of the Supreme Court.
We have time